All right, GM. Hi, everyone. How's it going? The Graph Discord. How is it going, Graph Devs? We are streaming on Graph Devs and we are in chat in the Graph Discord. And welcome to another episode of the Graph Builders Office Hours. And we've got an amazing guest again. So he's coming through. I think you were here, what, a month and a half ago for the GRC 20 spec, and you're back for the GRC 20 hackathon. We've got Yaniv Tall, everyone. How you doing, Yaniv?
Hey Marcus, it's good to be back. It was a lot of fun last time, and I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, this is I feel a good representation of how tech at the bleeding edge of tech is best produced, where we have a new spec, getting feedback, getting awareness to it, which was a few weeks ago. And now we're like, hey, let's go use it and let's go push it into the public. Let's go ahead and see what people can actually move forward with. Now the spec more, I'm not going to use the word finalized, but I'll use the word, it's more well-shaped. So really exciting times. Hi, everyone in chat. How's it going? We're going to wait probably 2, maybe 3 more minutes for people to filter in. I'm looking at chat right here, just so everyone knows. And in the meantime, Yaniv, how is your day going so far? And how is preparing for this GRC 20 hackathon going?
Yeah, things are going great. I'm super excited for it. We just announced it on Monday, and with basically 1 week for people to sign up. So it's moving quickly, but I'm glad that, we do these builder office hours every week. So had a chance to kind of jump on, but yeah, we're getting things ready. We're ready to kick things off. It's coming right up.
Yeah, it is really coming right up. I'm dropping the links in the chat. Excuse me. They are in Discord and they're going to be on Twitter as well. And so from there, getting the word out about this hackathon. And how's it going, chat? If there's any questions about this hackathon, feel free to share the questions in there. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end. And in terms of announcements that we have going on right now, really the biggest announcement that I want to push is, in fact, this hackathon. And for anyone out there who is wanting to get into the Q&A in the Q&A that I'm looking at is in the Graph Discord. So go ahead and jump into the Graph Discord. We do the Graph Builders Office Hours every Thursday at 5 p.m. UTC. And we feature either core development teams within the Graph ecosystem, or we also feature builders from the outside the ecosystem, such as Pains, such as dApps, and we make sure that they get their shine, because it's really important that developers of all backgrounds, all builds, all come in here and share what they're building. The mind share is really a powerful thing. So any thoughts that you want to share, Yaniv, besides just getting right into the workshop?
Happy to get started.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to step off stage. I'll let you get started, and chat, like I said, if there's any questions, drop them in, and have a good presentation, Yaniv.
Thank you. I'm going to start sharing and let me know if this does or doesn't work. Hopefully that's good. So, hey everyone, it's great to be back with you. And today we're going to be talking about the GRC 20 hackathon that we announced on Monday. It's going to be starting in just a few days, this upcoming Monday. So post in the chat. I can't actually necessarily see right now, but post in the chat if you've been following the graph for at least 2 years. Lots been happening over the last 2 years. It's been a really fun time. And post in the chat if you've been following the graph for over 4 years. So around the network launch. I'd be curious how many people have been around since then. So for those that have been using the graph and following the graph for a while, we've been working towards this vision of Web3 for a very long time, really since 2017. And we're really excited. We're going to be pushing this thing forward to the next stage. It's a really big vision, this whole Web3 idea. And, sometimes you have to take it just, one step at a time. So, people that have been around for a while will remember that before we launched the Graph Network, we did a hackathon called the Space Race. And there's going to be some commonality between this and the Space Race. We also did this kind of curator program, but this is going to be a really big step in realizing the vision of Web3. People have been posting about the hackathon on X, which I really appreciate. Keep it up. I like this one from this crypto commentator, right? This is the start of how we take all of the world's knowledge and bring it on chain. Historic. So I agree. I think this is going to be historic. I want to start with just a very quick overview of why knowledge graphs and what is Web3. Web3 is in crypto is really a crazy industry, right? Because we keep cycling between these like manias where we're like, Web3 is going to change everything, right? It's this revolution. To the other side where it's, maybe it's not actually going to be used for that much. Maybe it's just, Bitcoin's a store of value and that's it or something like that. And the reality is I do think Web3 is going to change everything. But we just needed the right pieces. And we believe that knowledge graphs are really the missing piece, right? Because what is Web3? It's a new platform for decentralized applications. And specifically, it's a new web that's verifiable, open, and composable, right? And, with decentralized networks in crypto, people kind of understand verifiability and openness. But what I think we've really been missing is this composability. And knowledge graphs are really the solution to composability, right? We want to create a web where the information is verifiable, it's open, and you can use it across applications. We start to see a little bit of that in some places in Web3, but, to really unlock the real thing, we need like the right primitives. And GRC20 is that primitive for composable knowledge and information across applications. So we're going to start hacking on that with this hackathon, and this will be a really great chance to learn a ton. You're going to learn about knowledge graphs, learn about AI. If you haven't had a chance to play around with AI much, and especially if you have, but in either way, this will be a really great way to, brush up your chops, learn from other people, and help to bootstrap the next generation of Web3 applications. So if, we view Web3 as being, right, this open, verifiable, composable web, we want to bootstrap that. We want to have organized knowledge and information that people can use for their applications. And, this was really, always a big goal with the graph, right, is to have open data and open knowledge and information that makes it easier for people to build amazing applications. For that, the high level goal is really just to have more useful knowledge and information better organized, right? The more useful the knowledge is, the more applicable it is to a larger number of people, the more people will benefit from Web3, the more applications we can build on Web3. So that's really kind of this high level goal. And as far as, developers, you can really think of two different sides of this kind of Web3 organized graph equation, right? There's organizing the knowledge. That's kind of half of it, right? Making sure that it's well organized and it's easy to use. And then the other side is building the applications, right? Building Web3 apps. So for this hackathon, we're going to focus on the first half. So this is kind of the first big step, right? Organizing some initial knowledge that is using this GRC20 primitive. It's composable, it's extensible, it's all these things that we want Web3 to be. And then on the other side, as a next step down the road, coming up soon, we will be able to build incredible Web3 apps that are way sicker than any apps that people have seen before in Web3. And it's going to be enabled by these new primitives. So the hackathon is 5 weeks. It starts on February 3rd. It's online. You can join from anywhere. And we've got 150,000 GRT up for grabs in bounties. Let's see. I guess I'll just jump in straight into some of the areas that we want to focus on. So, our goal is to organize, the world's public knowledge and information. There are commonalities between that mission and Google's mission, right? Theirs was also, to organize and make universal, useful all the world's, knowledge and information. So, people called the graph the Google of blockchain, but we need to get the real world data and knowledge on chain on Web3, right? And so we think a fun way to do this is to bring in some focus areas so that people can collaborate and work together on a few kind of focus areas. And we think that'll be a really fun way to do this. You can learn from each other, and we can build something that's really useful in a few areas. And we want Web3 to move beyond just kind of speculation, beyond the casinos, and so, Web3 really is going to, change the whole economy, right? We have, we have an opportunity to have, a golden era right now, right? A new golden age, the Roaring Twenties. Um, and Web3 is going to be a big part of that. So we need to get out into the real world. So three of the areas we want to focus on are education, jobs, and regions. And let's start, for example, with jobs. So I want to show some brief examples. So you may have seen that we've launched GeoGenesis for early access. We're going to be opening this up more and more, over the coming days and weeks. But we're already starting to organize knowledge for a few different industries, focusing on crypto to start. Now, this Geo is just one application, right? On top of the knowledge graphs, you could build any kind of application, right? So this is just, a way to kind of see knowledge and information in one way, and to contribute to it in one way. You could think of this almost like maybe like a CMS or something, right? If you got your like WordPress and you've got a place where you can go in and you can see all your stuff, and then if you want to have a custom website or something like that to your storefront, you can, right? So here, for example, for the crypto industry, we'd want to see things like news, maybe upcoming events, projects that are in the crypto space, people who's working in this industry, and jobs. And with jobs, you'd want to see things like, what are the different roles? Maybe, there's software engineering. What are the different skills? Maybe Solidity is super in demand, right? Maybe Rust is super in demand, or other things like marketing. So for every industry, you want to kind of organize these sorts of things for the people that are working in that industry, and people who want to break into the industry. And so these are just kind of a few examples. Now, this is an older version of GeoGenesis. This is what we were using before we launched the new version that's based on GRC 20. We still have a lot of content here that we want to migrate over, but for now it's here. And just to show a few examples of a few different kind of industries. Now, people might have different industries that they're interested in, and that's really great. And this is where we can kind of divide and conquer and divvy things up. Personally, I think agriculture is a really interesting industry. I think we want to see really big changes, in places like the US, where, they're using a lot of chemicals and unsustainable practices, sometimes, poisoning our food. And, I'd love to see a shift, towards more sustainable and healthier practices for agriculture. So you can imagine that's an industry, and at the same time, there's realities of that industry. They need to produce fruits, vegetables, and grains, and livestock, and all of these things. And the economics might be difficult. There's lots of knowledge that's required to do that job well. And so this is just an example of how to kind of, organize an industry around goals and try to see even, from a top level, like, what are the areas of the economy that we'd love to see transformed? And maybe Web3 can help. If we look at areas like social work, this is related to some of the work that we've done, but here we've done, I think, a better job. It's still just a beginning. We have the kind of the goals, but we also have here like different roles and skills. So you could imagine that if you're doing something like let's say like a Web3 LinkedIn, one of the first things you do, right, is you create your resume and you're adding your skills. And so what you'd want is a sort of drop down of like, here are the different roles, here are the different skills, and you want it all to be interconnected, right? So that if I'm looking for a job and the job is, to be a software engineer, or maybe it's a specific type of cryptographer or something, that I could learn about that role, see, which other companies are hiring for that same role, and maybe I can like learn about how would I be able to apply for something like that? Like, what courses could I take, or what could I learn? And that takes us to the second area, right, which is education. Um, it's just, especially in the U.S., I think a lot of people are seeing that the university system, and even grade schools, that system, it's pretty broken. And higher education, higher learning is really valuable, but how do we organize the accreditation? How do we make it more accessible to people? How do we make sure that these things aren't getting captured and stop evolving? Right? A lot of this stuff has become really politicized. And so, I think Web3 can really play a big role in helping to, revolutionize education, making it more accessible, higher quality. Um, and all, so much of that is knowledge, and so to start, we could look at what are the different, academic fields, and for each of the academic fields, like, what are the different courses? What are the different lessons? What are the different topics? So, and we could see, the different degrees, things that, pathways that people can learn, accreditation things, and then we could tie that to the jobs. We've got some examples of, maybe, for example, like cryptography, it's also related to, crypto, and maybe you could actually learn cryptography on something like this. So you could start just by like categorizing and kind of organizing these top level topics, lessons, courses, this kind of stuff. If it, get to more and more content, but just the organization of it and the mapping it is really powerful. And then finally, regions. So we live in the real world, and we have existing countries and states and cities, and we want all of that to be part of the knowledge graph, right? This is really going to empower next generation applications. So with the knowledge graph, we want to have it so that people can search for things, and there's already an entity for that thing, right? So let's say that I was building an app for events, right? I want to build the next meetup, and somebody's creating an event, and it's going to be in, the city of San Francisco. What do we know about the city of San Francisco? Is it something that you can point to, and then you could kind of query to, for example, show all of the events that are happening in San Francisco? That would be really great. But, if every application is using a different ID for the city of San Francisco, then how are we going to do that, right? These guys are using this ID, those guys are using that ID, and then there's no way for me to aggregate that really well together. And so that's where the composability comes in, and that's why we really want to have this like global knowledge graph. And so I would want to, for example, search for San Francisco and see, oh, here's a city, right? The city of San Francisco. And I could integrate that into my app, right? So, you could have autocomplete for everything. And we'd want to have information about like cities. So for example, here, right, a city of San Francisco, maybe you'd want to have like, local news and events and places, right? All the local businesses, and we can do things like arts and culture, and help revitalize cities and help people find interesting things to do. So these are all examples of the kinds of things that we could do at a local level, right? And we could do this at a local level, right, for cities. But also we can organize information that's relevant to like countries or states, or at different, kind of scopes. So this is just an example, right, of what a city page could look like with upcoming events, maybe trending restaurants, neighborhoods. And all of this stuff would then be part of the knowledge graph. So, the more knowledge that we add, the better it's organized, right? And now using this kind of composable ontology, where, you can have the reuse and you can have the composability, but you can also customize things, right? This is really what Web3 is all about. We want to make it easier and easier to build the next great app. And when we have these composable primitives, that's exactly what we can do. So this is some examples of some of the content that we could look to organize for those three different areas, right? The jobs, the education, and the regions. And next, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the tools that you could be using and some skills that you could learn along the way. So we've talked a little bit about knowledge graphs, and right now AI is super hot, right? Hopefully you've had a chance to play around with AI. It's really incredible what we can do with these tools. So AI is really going to intersect with knowledge graphs in two main ways. One is it's going to make it way faster and easier to ingest knowledge and put it into the knowledge graph. Right? AI can automate a lot of stuff that before would have taken us a lot of time. So it's really a superpower in that way, and you can leverage those superpowers to do super things. The other way that the two really intersect is in how you consume the knowledge from the knowledge graph. Right? These LLMs are super powerful, and you want to be able to have a great, easy interface for retrieving knowledge with natural language. And so there's really two different ways right now that people kind of structure this stuff for LLM. So you have these embeddings and vectors, right, which deals with the textual representation of the information. And some of the things that LLMs, some of those components do really well is, if you have these embeddings, you can do kind of similarity searches, right? And those things are really great. If you have some question, it can find like relevant information based on similarity of the words. And that's really powerful. But what that doesn't do is actually encode, real meaning. Right? It's this kind of probabilistic thing, but it doesn't actually know what is correct. Whereas with knowledge graphs, you're able to structure things, really accurately, the relationships between different things, and you're able to keep that up to date, right? So we've all had the experience of you use an LLM and it gives you an answer that is suboptimal, right? Maybe it was true, a year ago, but it's no longer accurate. Or, there's all kinds of ways in which the information that it gives you might be wrong. And then it's hard to kind of correct it. And it's hard to know, okay, what exactly did you base that answer on? Now, some of these AI tools have gotten better because they can actually link to the primary sources. But again, it's not very precise. And so in an ideal world, we would have entities for everything. Everything would be structured correctly, the entities themselves and the relationships between them. And then when you ask an LLM a question, what it does is a graph query against the knowledge graph, right? So you ask a question, right? It does a graph query against the knowledge graph, gives you back the relevant information, and then the LLM can take that and generate the answer that's based on the correct, accurate, knowledge. And so that is extremely powerful. And so that's kind of some of the stuff that we'll be able to do, when we structure more of this knowledge and information into a knowledge graph. For this hackathon, using AI to ingest a lot, this knowledge and information, it's going to be a real superpower, and you'll be able to play with different models and build up your stack of tools for leveraging AI to do cool things. So that's some of the content I wanted to cover. So I'd be super interested in just kind of opening this up and kind of having a conversation about the hackathon, about knowledge graphs, about what we want to accomplish. Really open to any kind of questions and conversations at this point.
Awesome, awesome. And so, yeah, we do have some good questions in the chat. We'll go right down the list. Here we go. Any idea who will be the judges? If yes, can you share?
I don't know that I want to share the specific people per se, but it's a combination of folks at the Graph Foundation and at Geo.
All right, next question. Can you give a couple examples of what you would like to see for this hackathon proposal?
Yeah, now keep in mind the submission is meant to be pretty simple. So there's a link here, right, to apply. We just have a few questions, and honestly, I mean, you really just want to demonstrate that you're a real person, and that this is an area that you're interested in. But don't be too worried about the application as long as those things apply. Now we're going to spend the first week of the hackathon basically, coming up with ideas and focus areas. And when it comes to this type of a hackathon, there's kind of an interesting balance that we want to strike. It's interesting because we're actually going to create something that is useful, right? A lot of times with hackathons, you do a project and then it's kind of throwaway, right? Mm-hmm. Our goal is that, you can hack around and you can learn and experiment and play and do some cool things. But the thing that you build is actually going to be useful, right? Maybe you could enable 10 amazing applications based on this. So that's really cool. So to do that, essentially what we want to do is balance what kind of knowledge and information would be most useful. And we have some ideas about that. And, maybe you also have amazing ideas. Maybe your ideas are better than ours. So, we want to, try to look at, okay, what would be the most useful knowledge and information that would enable interesting applications, in these areas. And then we want to match that against really your interests, right? What things excite you? You'll always do better work if you're naturally passionate or interested in a specific, in the thing that you're doing. So that's what we got to figure out is what is that match? And in an ideal world, we minimize duplication. It would be unfortunate if, two different people or teams, spent 4 weeks, they came back and they had the exact same knowledge that they were importing. All right. That would be duplicated and potentially wasted work. So in an ideal world, what we do is we kind of figure that out. And then we kind of assign areas of ownership that based on what would be useful and based on what you're interested in. And then you kind of know, okay, if I knock this out of the park and I spend a bunch of time and I do a good job with this, it's not going to be duplicated. It's going to really become part of this global graph that could enable a bunch of interesting applications.
Yeah, very cool. And I will second that notion about hackathon teams. Build for, yes, the hackathon. And then also, likely, if you're thinking big and you're thinking in terms of what could be useful and an interesting project to you long term, not only are you more likely to win the hackathon, but also carrying the project on and forward and really internalizing a different way of thinking is the long-term benefit. So yeah, for sure. Go for the short-term prize. That's great. And also think about something that you can carry with you. And that's I'll second that, Yaniv, as a good concept there. Let's see, a little bit of a longer question here. What is your take on the GRC 20/Geogenesis tackling the parent-child-cousin structure of L1s versus L2s versus cross-chain, para, sub, hub chains living in L2s and L3s, etc.? I would love to share my take, maybe as a hackathon proposal, but not sure it would even apply.
Huh. So that's super interesting. Would love to hear your take. I do wonder if what you're thinking of building might be different than this goal of organizing knowledge for this hackathon. So maybe that becomes an interesting one for a different hackathon that we do, but for sure the infrastructure stuff is interesting. So, yeah, would love to chat about that. I mean, right now, Geogenesis is launched on one chain, right? It's technically a layer 3 chain on top of Arbitrum. And that's just kind of the initial chain. One of the reasons, it's Geogenesis. This is just kind of the first step. But ultimately, knowledge is going to live on lots of different chains, right? No question about that. And so, all of this infrastructure, should be open and composable. Now, the considerations with knowledge is a little bit different than the considerations with value. And it's interesting to kind of consider the blockchain engineering implications of that, right? When you're talking about value and money, your primary concern is double spend, right? And what you don't want is, somebody to move $1 million onto a chain and then that money gets stuck or it gets stolen by the operators and then you can't get it back, right? So that's the type of security you're thinking about for money. Now, for knowledge doesn't exactly have that property, right? It doesn't necessarily like get stuck, right? It's not like, oh shit, my knowledge is over there and now I can't use it, right? And so you do want the data to be available, right? You want data availability, you want, good storage solutions and accessibility. You want it to be indexed so you can query it. But there is value in having consensus, we believe, on knowledge to kind of, for the same reason that databases are ACID compliant, right? An ACID compliant database has like atomicity and it has like consistency. And for many information systems, you want that consistency. You don't want it so that, things are in an inconsistent state. And so these are kind of interesting questions. So ultimately, the question of how do you create a global graph where there's, consensus on the state of the knowledge graph, even as, people are building applications that are living on different chains and all this kind of stuff. That's super interesting. And we should be having more, discussions about those types of topics.
Yeah, and I see a few other questions on there, but this is a follow-up from myself to you need. And I know this is Geogenesis. I know this is GRC20 that literally just a few weeks ago it was proposed publicly and now is taking more shape and having testing. And I mean, this is a big push. What would you say to any other developers or BD or marketing or anyone tuning in right now who's part of another protocol, who is just starting to hear about GRC20 and what it might mean for them in the future?
Yeah. So at this stage, when things are early, it's probably best to be part of like, the core crew of developers that are building it, developing it, because that's how you're going to learn the most. We want to shape this as a community, so you want to get involved, right? So things like this hackathon is a great way to get close to that conversation. Now, what's it going to mean as this stuff grows, right? And so, I think this hackathon is going to be a really big piece of demonstrating the next level of growth. And then we'll have a lot more that we can see. We'll have a lot more developers that understand how to use these tools, and they can go off and they can teach other people. So, at that stage, maybe, we'll be ready for people to use this in different types of applications. Keeping in mind also, right now we're kind of organizing the knowledge on Geo. Here we're going to be using tools outside of Geo, right? That's why, it's a hackathon. So developers will be writing scripts and tools and different things to generate the knowledge. But we haven't yet released the tools to build custom applications. So that's going to be coming up, and that is also very exciting. And so, the risk with this sort of thing is, what we want to do is create a stable foundation, right? We want to enable you to build applications that will actually live forever, right? Where you could build your piece of like, here's a really cool flow, and you can release that. And, if only 1,000 people love that user interface, they can use it and they can know that they'll be able to continue to use it forever, right? And they're not taking this risk on you. And that's what Web3, is really about, because, it makes it so it's easier for people to build stuff. and it's easier for people to use stuff, right? Because it's not this thing where they're burnt out of, if I use this thing and then the app developer goes away, then all of the time that I spent investing in this thing is gone, right? And that'll make it easier for the developers because users will be more willing to try your stuff, right? So if the promise is, we're going to give you a stable foundation to build really cool apps, there's obviously tension with that in the very earliest days, because by definition, at the very earliest days, we're at the bleeding edge. So GRC 20 is really meant to be one of those core foundational pieces. The next layer for how you build your application, that's going to come out super soon. And so the main thing at this point is just to learn the concepts, learn about ontologies, about types, about, properties, relations, why we define things kind of in this way. And then really the idea is going to be that, people kind of rebuild their apps using composable primitives. And maybe it doesn't take a ton, maybe it's just some slight tweaks. But really it comes down to how do you structure the information for your app, right? And and how do you generate metadata, or how do you generate knowledge or information for your app, right? Like if we look at like what, Web3 apps today, I mean, I don't see a big proliferation of non-financial applications, right? And I think part of that is actually that this piece was missing, so you could look at something like NFTs and say that was maybe the first breakout application of Web3. You had kind of the tokens and the ICOs, and then NFTs were the first thing, even though they were mostly financial, but they also had this component that was non-financial, right? Which is these old JPEGs. And how did we store those beautiful JPEGs, right? We had JSON that we would put sometimes on IPFS, sometimes on centralized servers, right? And then we would anchor that on chain. When you have that metadata is that JSON, that is not composable, right? And so the NFT stuff, they never really became super composable. Now it's the same thing with DAOs. So DAOs are an application that are on chain, and that's super interesting, right? You're like, oh, we can have proposals, we can vote on things, but how do we structure the information for DAOs, right? You have these proposals. What are those proposals? They're JSON objects, right? These are the fields. What are we using as IDs in those fields? What happens if the structure of a proposal changes and we want, it's too rigid. And so because, so that is, I think, how most people have thought about building things in Web3. And then now we have these things like Farcaster, and there's interesting experimentation happening in Farcaster, but I think they kind of have like the same problem, right? Which is, it's too rigid of a structure, right? Now we're trying to define this protocol as like a social, thing, and people get excited about Web3 social, but I don't think you can really design a protocol to be application specific in that way. It's inherently rigid. It's like, okay, so now the protocol defines what are all of the social actions that we can perform, or the protocol specifies these are all of the types of things, right? Okay, there's posts and video posts, whatever, but then that becomes rigid. And so what we really need is a generalized way of defining types and defining properties and defining relationships between things and making that things that can evolve, that applications can extend. And again, that's where the knowledge graphs come back. So ultimately, I do think people will need to, build their applications using the correct composable primitives. And the ones that do will be part of this global web that's open, verifiable, and composable. And as we grow this thing, as there's more useful knowledge and information, and as there's better and better user interfaces that are all composable, people are going to want to use this stuff. And that's kind of the bet, is that like this thing is going to be freaking amazing. And we just got to kind of, kickstart this process.
Yeah. I mean, just to have a win of having cross database standardization of an ID, that would be, to start with, if we could just, if I'm all on board, just to have more standardization of IDs and everything that comes from from that, just in that fundamental primitive, I'm all for any type of little bit of agreement across data sharing, across databases. And there's so many different types of databases. There's so many different ways to store data. And therein is the centralization aspect of it. And therein is the, kind of like so many different ways to store it. If there's a way that we could have more agreements on this, that would be very, very nice.
Yeah. So that's actually a very interesting point you just made there. And I'd love to, double tap on that. So like GRC20 is really about how the knowledge is stored at rest, fundamentally. Now from there, you could index that in different databases. And to your point, there's different types of databases out there. Some people love Postgres, right? Some people want to play around with graph databases, things like Neo4j. Maybe it all just goes into a vector database or Elasticsearch or, so you that becomes part of the next stage in the pipeline and in the stack, right? Where you have your knowledge at rest. And then you can ingest that into different types of databases, or right in graph parlance, those would be data services. So you could have different data services so that you can use, the plethora of different databases that are maybe optimized for different read access patterns.
I'm seeing some more questions in here. We are looking to populate. We are looking to populate this knowledge with existing and accessible from data from Web 2. If so, how much, this is talking about, I assume the GRC20 hackathon, this is a question specific to that. Are we looking to populate this knowledge with existing and accessible data from Web 2? And if so, how much of our focus will be on verifiability on that data?
Yes, that's exactly right. You could think about this a little bit like as like a vampire attack on Web 2. So
cool.
Let's do it, right? There's so much knowledge and information that's on the open web. And in a lot of ways, it's similar to what the AI teams have done, right? If you think about all of the AI models, how did they get trained?
Yeah.
Right? They got trained on all the open data, right? They vacuumed it up and then they built something, useful. And so, we want to do the same thing. Now, our bet is, that kind of with token incentives, we can make that fun and profitable. So, yes, as far as the verifiability, I mean, essentially where this comes down to is, governance. Now, I have a post we actually need to fix. So I'm going to embarrassingly admit that we had an issue with our bullets, and we're fixing that right now.
It's okay. On Graph Builders, we're all builders here, so little errors here and there are part of the workflow, right, guys?
Yeah, yeah. So okay, so I shared this post, Knowledge Graphs for Web3. Please read this if you haven't. After that, there was the next post, which was introducing GRC20, and then over the break, kind of in December, right before the break, I published Governing Public Knowledge. Now I need to fix the bullets because I'm missing the bullets, but other than that, this is a very seminal post, and I recommend everybody read it. Maybe we'll tell you when, hope later today.
I'm sharing it in the chat right now.
Yeah, let's repost it later today after we fix the bullets. But okay, so basically, the question is, how do we design a system that converges toward truth? And we want that truth to be represented as a knowledge graph, recognizing that any representation of knowledge is an imperfect approximation of the truth, right? Nobody can claim that they know what the truth is, but we can still try our best to represent it, and we can create a system that improves over time. And we want the system to be open. So we have things like these personal spaces that anybody can publish, anyone can create and publish to, and then we have public spaces. And the public spaces have governance. And the point of this governance is to allow larger and larger groups of people to get to consensus. Now, it's a super interesting idea here, and you get into really interesting philosophical conversations, and, would love to have these conversations with more of the community. So I think it's super important, and this really just gets to the heart of the structure of society. And I think if you dive into this, you get smack dab into like the biggest problems facing civilization today. and how actually the tools that we're building here can really be the solution to the biggest problems in the world. Um, and so, so much of it is how do you know what information to trust, right? And how do we get large groups of people to agree and to work together? And so, the public spaces are a way of doing that. Now, the idea with these spaces is that each space should be able to define its own governance process, and it's going to be different for different spaces. Now, at the beginning, we have a default governance that we've launched with. We think it's a great place to start, but it's going to be very imperfect, and hopefully over time, people will experiment with even more interesting different governance systems, and we can kind of get at that problem. So I'll describe the governance that we have right now just briefly. Is any public space like this you'll see has editors and members. Now I just created this, so I'm the only one here. But if we go to like the crypto space, we'll see that this one has 3 editors and 16 members. Right? And the members can basically propose changes. It's really easy to become a member. You just request to join, and you only need 1 editor to approve your request in order to become a member. And then the members can propose changes to anything. So you can edit, you go into edit mode, you can propose changes. And then when you publish your changes, it goes to a vote of the editors. So the editors are really meant to be more of the experts. And then the members is anyone who, is basically, aligned with the values of the space and kind of agrees to the goals and the policies and things. And essentially you'd participate in a space if you generally trust the editors and you think that they're good. And if you don't think that they're good, then, you can create your own space. So that's kind of the idea there. So as far as the verification, what I would say is, do your best to get accurate knowledge and information. If it's not accurate, that's all going to be part of the judging process. We're going to do our best to evaluate. We might not be perfect, but we all want to do the best job we can to be as accurate as we can. Over time, we can work on, interesting systems for, like every space basically will have to experiment on their own for like, what's your verification process? How do you make sure that you have good quality information? And essentially it's the job of the editors to ensure quality of the knowledge in their space.
Mm. Yeah, I feel the openness and collaboration, quality control trifecta is one that will never be solved. And the best way to do it is transparently and openly, and just try to have the people participating and having quality information and always evolving and always changing. I feel like the GRC 20 and then also these spaces allow for that type of evolution week to week and year to year as people change, as that changes. So very cool. Let's see, got a question here specific to scraping. When I look around, I usually build a quick scrape that goes across 5 to 50 job platforms. Curious about how GeoGenesis will take care of this. Be an aggregator of all Web 2 jobs, just be an indexer of all Web 2 and Web 3 sites, actually list them all and act and another platform to look at. It's a schema thing for sure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, amazing. And that sounds like exactly the kind of stuff we want to be doing here. So all of the above, agree with everything that you said. I think we want to start by defining the best ontologies that we can. And that's part of what we're going to be doing the first week, right? During next week of the hackathon. So if we look at something like jobs, we want to agree on standardized types and relations to say, okay, this is a job opening, right? And that'll, reference a role, it'll reference a project that's hiring, what are the fields that we want to capture for the job openings? And ideally that's mostly standardized. Now, again, part of the benefit of the knowledge graphs is other applications can customize it. So if they want to reuse all of those fields that are kind of standardized, but then for their specific application, right, it's specifically for, hiring doctors, and there's a different set of questions that they need for hiring doctors, they can add those additional fields and they can customize it, but it's all still interoperable. And so, So that's kind of step one. And then you're exactly right. The web scraping is going to be huge. And, we do want to essentially scrape all of the existing data that we can. And I do think we see like then, the knowledge graph becoming kind of, the aggregation layer, right? So ideally, now we don't really want duplicates, right? You could have duplicates in the knowledge graph, but it's not really valuable. So we could call that less well organized, right? If there's duplicates. And so what you'd want is maybe they exist, but the stuff that people use should be better aggregated, better organized. So you'd remove the duplicates there, and that's ideally what people would actually be using as their source of truth, right? If someone's building an application and they want to query for all the job openings, right, they want that to be like a well organized, no duplicate, standardized kind of list. So that's where we want to get to, is that aggregation, quality aggregation, where part of the value that we provide is that everything is better interconnected. Right. So, it's not these one-offs a lot of times in these platforms, right? They just use a text field for the location, right? They just use a text field for, the role or whatever. And it's much better if I could actually say, hey, like, how many software engineer job openings are there in the crypto space, right? That have been open for more than, 3 months, and, what's the average salary, or like whatever it is that you might care to get, like, the more interconnected everything is, the better applications we'll be able to build, the more, insights people will be able to derive, the smarter the LLMs will get, all of the above. So that's the goal. And then from there, people will be able to build custom applications, right? That'll be kind of the next step. So, is Geo going to be the best app for, job hunting and finding a job? Probably not. It will be a place where people who are working on organizing the knowledge can really browse and dig in and understand every detail and have like the full view. So I think it'll be valuable for a large subset of people. But what I would fully expect is, once we release the tools for building custom apps, that people will build like super optimized, amazing user interfaces that is maybe tailored to, better tailored to whatever markets they want to serve.
Cool. Cool. I love this theme of composability and verifiability, and having I feel like that's where Web3 is heading as a whole. I mean, I feel like there's this mind share across protocols, across teams, that has gotten to the point where, how do we make more efficient this data sharing? How do we do it better? Because there's so many different ways it's happening. It's like, okay, let's we had this ballooning, if you will, and now it's settling, and I feel like this is part of that, and that
That's
good
right.
way in
And so
discussing these problems.
you really do need the right kind of standards and primitives to enable that composability. And I think people do rightly feel that that hasn't existed yet, and that's why we haven't quite had that yet. And that really is the core of Web3. And then once we have that, I think this idea then of being able to build even more like customized and specialized applications is going to be really powerful, right? And I think that's a big part of the value of Web3 is, imagine that every segment has like a perfectly optimized application just for them, right? We can move away from these one size fits all apps, right? If you think about something like, Eventbrite or Meetup, those are one size fits all apps, right? It's the same
And they're
Meetup
kind of
app.
rough. I mean, they're not bad, but they're kind of rough at times.
They're
Yeah,
kind
for
of
sure.
rough, right? It's the same
Yeah.
Meetup app, whether, we're playing a sports game or whether we're giving a JavaScript talk, right? And it's, and it's the same app if we're throwing a conference, right? Well, a conference is totally different, right? A conference, maybe you've got multiple stages over multiple days, and there's a whole other set of things. But you still want that interoperability. I still want to be able to, show me all of the events that, in areas that I'm interested in next weekend, and let me browse and see like what's there. And I still want to be able to say, okay, like show me all of the talks that Vitalik has given in the last 2 years, and show me, what he announced in those talks, what were, so all of this stuff, it's all about organizing knowledge and information, making it composable. But then, that next step will be so powerful when people can really build the custom apps. And it's like, whatever it is that you care about, like the opportunities will just be endless for better serving the markets that you care about, right? Whatever it is you're passionate about, the people that, you want to make happy, you'll just have such better tools for giving them like super sick apps.
Yeah. I can't wait. Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, we were talking off screen just a few minutes before you were on about how crypto and a lot of different Web3 concepts are reaching a tipping point. And here we are, January 30th, 2025. And what a time to be in this industry. What a time to be pushing for bleeding edge tech. What a time to be pushing for new concepts. This is an exciting time. So, yeah. Well, Yaniv, I just want to thank you for your time. Is there anything else that you'd want to share before we go ahead and release these developers into the GRC 20 hackathon application?
Yeah, I'm just super excited to work with everybody. So I'm going to be super hands-on. We've got a great team of people who are going to be part of this. I'll be able to learn from some great developers. So it should be a lot of fun. And the main thing I would just say is apply today. It should only take 5 minutes. It should be pretty quick and easy. So, the applications close on Sunday, but there's no reason to wait till then. So apply today, and we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Awesome. Hear that, devs? Go ahead, apply today, get out there, and great having you out there, chat. It was a great conversation, great questions out there, and I'll see you guys next week as well. And with that being said, thank you so much, Yaniv, for your time. I really appreciate you pushing on this primitive, pushing to get this out there, pushing to get this in front of devs, and being transparent about this process. That's a huge deal. So thank you so much. And with that being said, have a good rest of your Thursday, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Stop the stream. Take care.
All right. Wait, so